Hello YouTube, I'm Dan Rogan, and on this video we're going to continue the public build series. In the last video we'd start doing some data retrieval, and we're going to continue with that, and we're going to do some paging, etc. If that interests you, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. So I'll put a link to the previous video up here where we do the actual start of this video, which is split into two parts because it's getting a little long. I'm trying to keep like half-an-hour videos. In the first half, you've seen us connect to the Pokemon API, which is an open API that anyone can access Pokemon information from. It is limited, so you probably wouldn't use this exact API in production, but you'd run your own version of it. Now, if you look in the video we're about to jump into, I have just got a list of data coming from an API. And you can see that's bound in visually. And now we're going to go from it to consuming data within the API and pagination, etc. So let's get into the code. Go back to Pokemon. And there we go. Here's 20 pages. Now, does that count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there's a few there. So as you can see that there's no links yet, or no scrolling, but that we can just turn on later. But what we will do in this instance, because they're buttons and they're lists, is when you click it, we actually want something to happen. Just jump back to the code. Let's jump back here, and whoops, I'll just pull the other stuff back a sec. So I'll fix that again, and then I want to, let's say, I want to preview Pokemon, and I will use the Pokemon record. Okay, and then I'll get rid of these. Now, what's happening here is this list will only show if it's not loading data. Then, so if there was a previous state, let's say, and then we're doing a new load, this table will hide while the loading of data will occur. Then for every result in the list, it's going to create a list item button, which is a full length clickable button. And we could do that. Now, as you can see, it's failing because I've added this click event in. Now, this click event is calling a function called preview Pokemon and passing in that Pokemon, which is the instance of the list. One of these results is being passed in. Here we go. So let's just save that again and then jump back into the page. Okay, so back to the page. So we need to add this function. Now we're going to have a Pokemon, and it's a JSON array. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We are actually going to retrieve the Pokemon first because we want to get the data for this given Pokemon. So we're going to do Pokemon service dot fetch by URL because we're getting a URL, and then this Pokemon will have a URL function fetch by URL. Okay, then we will subscribe, and that will give us the Pokemon detail because it's an individual. And then what do we do with that? Let's just put an any. Otherwise I'd have to put a class in. Because I use TypeScript, it wants me to define the types of the information flowing through the system, which I think is a great idea in a larger system. And there's a lot of value. If I was to work with Pokemon for a long time, I was going to build a larger app, I would go through that process. But you know, making an any basically suppresses the type checking which allows me to just put in this Pokemon.url. And I think that's okay for initial investigational coding or prototypey sort of stuff, but I would not be happy to see that throughout my production code. Let's just be clear, but this is not production code. All right, so I would do the same thing as I've done here. When I click the link, the first thing I would do is just inspect the data which is returned. It's just the Pokemon detail. And Pokemon detail. All right, let's see what happens here. So we get a refresh. So then we go, you can see the Pokemon list is there. Hit Warthol. Okay, and then it is retrieving. Okay, so we can see for a Warthol, am I saying that right? Whatever. For this bloody Pokemon. Oh my. 30 minutes is up again. I might need to switch cameras. Come on. And I'm back. I actually need to switch cameras because this one, which is the primary camera, that one doesn't time out, but this one does, because it's a standard camera, using a, as you can see, an Elgato plugin. But this is my older camera. Anyway, carrying back onto the code, as you can see, there's a bunch of information here. It doesn't really matter what that information is for us today. What it matters is the fact that we've bound this into an API, and then we've been able to call, take information from that API and make a subsequent request for more information. So if you remember the design, we did intentionally want to do this, pop that preview into here with the information. So let's do that. Let's jump back to the application first, and I'm going to increase the size of that because I'm really primarily looking at use case on the mobile phone. Even when it's a web client, it's primarily going to be mobile phone based. That most people search on the internet on their phones these days. So that to me would be the primary design, and then the actual desktop view should be secondary. Anyway, let's get back to the app. Out of the pages, we want to go up to the top level, the app container. All right, so here we go here, nav opened. All right, so let's go to the component. So in this component, what I'm going to say is start nav and nav. I'm going to say end nav data. Oops. Data. And that will be an any. Okay. And we will default that to null. Okay. So and nav data. So then in end nav data, what I'm going to do for the page perspective is I'm just going to dump it out for now, right? Because we can, you know, improve the data later. So what is this? This is a binding, and this is an Angular, the concept of piping. So you can pass that into a component, which renders it out, and then I believe they still have the JSON component, but this will just dump the JSON data, which shows that the flow of information is moving through the system correctly before I worry about how that information looks on that exact page. I want to make sure the data is there before I worry about how that data is displayed. All right, so we have the nav data here, and then we go back to the module. We are subscribing. As you can see, this is, let me make that a bit easier to see. As you can see here, we have a subscription on the start data, and we have subscription on the end data. Now, here I have the start data with a set of strings being open, close, toggle, etc. And this one currently was passing a Boolean. So if it was true and if it's closed. So what I will say here is if data is null, then I want it to close. Else if well, null or not null, unexpected value. Well, we don't really have that use case. So let's just get rid of this and say if the data is null, then we want it to be closed. Else we want it to open, and nav opened equal to true, and the nav data will equal the incoming data from the service. And I will say that the end nav data, it's no longer an error, it's just a log file. I'll take these out later, or sometimes I wrap them in like a global variable, so I can turn them off and on, or I'll add them into sort of module-y stuff so I can turn visibility in and out. But that's normally in part of a slightly larger C dollar. Where's this? Oh, up here. All right, so I have what was the subject? So I've deleted that subject. So that will be the nav subject dollar. Okay, which is the observable. So now, if I click there, it's still a Boolean, so you can see it's coming through. Now that is only there for us to trigger some stuff. Isn't normally, or it's not going to stay there either. And let's make this 50% for now. Okay. So now when I click there, we have a good half. So if I'm trying to choose which one, I click it, I can see a preview. Then that's useful because I can see the preview, but I haven't lost the context on the left. It's quite frustrating when you use a service or a system that has a search functionality, which I think we'll add. And when you have a result set and then you click on the first result, and then you have a look at it and you're like, oh, that's not the result I wanted. And then you try to go back to the search result and you're at a clean search and you have to research. Now, it's just a pain functionality, and you want to make your system as easy to use as possible, because that user experience is why sometimes people take product A over product B. And those small things that don't look that big a deal over time become the reason why people dislike your application if they have to use it. So I try to make sure that we have that concept of, especially in searching, some sort of preview or making sure the results set are quite dense. But as you can see here with just the names, like let's say I couldn't remember which Charmeleon or Charizard, right? Because they're evolved forms of each other. I won't know which one I want of these three. So was it this one or this one? And I want to be able to see some of that before jumping in and having a look. Okay, so we have that. Now let's jump back to the Pokemon page. Pokemon page. And in here, we will, instead of open and bus, what's that bind into on this Pokemon page? Do I bind it into anything? Open and bus. Oh yeah, in the nav bar. Yeah. So let's just take that icon out in here, because we don't really want that anymore. And what we will do is on this click of Pokemon list, preview Pokemon, we will send this Pokemon to the side nav to enable a preview. So I will get rid of the data, and I will just take this out because we no longer want to open and close in here. And in the preview, I will take the data that was loaded and I will pass that information through. So that allows me to decouple the delivery of information into like a separate preview. So as you can see, my preview is up at the top of the application, that side nav, which is a nice mechanism for me to like bring attention to data to determine what to do. Now, the outcome of that action in there is probably going to be a writer thing of like, here's a preview, and you're like, yes, this is the one I want, and you would click it, and then it'll go to a full details page. And that might be wrapped up in something else that we show in another video. But just for now, it's useful to potentially send information through different parts without creating direct connections. So we just have this, the service bus that has a message, and we listen to it, and then we publish, and then that can be imported anywhere. And that allows us to have this nice communication through the application without like tunneling through component after component after component. But there's still value in that too with managed components, but that's probably too far for today's conversation. So let's have a look at this. Is this working? Charizard. And now I'll do a data load, and here we go. Here is the Charizard data. Now Charizard data looks quite big, so we don't actually have a good render for that. And then if I click off that, there we go. We're still back in our search results. We have not lost our results. Now, I think that's quite useful. All right, well, the next thing that I would do would generally be more like a search, because our pagination with the next and back button, but the next and back button, as you can see here, if I just quickly show you, can be done pretty straightforwardly, because we have the ability to have the next and load, which is the same as running this fetch list. Okay, so I would do fetch list next would be the next thing if I was going to add some paging. I potentially could also add parameters in this fetch list that reduce the size, and I could add some scrolling. The functionality that I would probably want in an app is more like a search would be the next thing. But when I have a look at this API, because it's like a public open API, it doesn't seem to have a search function in the Pokemon API. I have to give it the fully qualified name or the ID. Okay, and you can see if we look at the result, which is actually returned, these Pokemon results have Pokemon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can give them the ID and that will return it, or we can give the definitive name like Beedrill and that will return the data set, but this implementation doesn't appear to have it. Okay. Now the next plus works very similar. If we just have a look at the back to the service a sec. Let's have a look here. We got the service module, that component too far. All right, let's just, so we flick back to the service. You have a fetch list by URL. If we call that function fetch by URL, it will just do the result set. So we could in that instance, in the Pokemon page, if we really wanted to, here we have a fetch list, and then we're using that fetch list here with the preview Pokemon. Now we could do something like page Pokemon, which is probably what I would call it. Okay, page Pokemon, and then I would do Pokemon like page URL. And the reason they would be different is because I want the behavior of what's occurring to be different. So it's basically the same thing, as in it uses the same function to call the URL, because we're getting the next back. So you can see that you can change the offset, you can change the limit if I want 20 or I want 10 coming back. I could even add this into the list function. So I could add a, do I want to add that? Or could I just add it? No, I won't do that. I won't do that. But as you can see here in the page, we can just take the page URL, which is going to be passed, which will be passed in. But in this instance, what we would do is we would basically do this functionality again. So we could refactor that out again if we wanted to either take like a URL, or if it doesn't give me a URL, run the base URL. But I don't like that personally, that pattern. But in this one, we would reset the values to 0 as we're doing a new data load, and I would then set the PokeList to the results set. Okay, yeah, and this would be the page Pokemon. Yeah. Okay, that would be, let's just call that results again. So now, and that I would make an any. So just so it would stop complaining with my TypeScript. In this early stage, as I mentioned before, I would type this later. So that would allow me to do a page. So if we come back to the value here, let's grab a slightly different. One of the things I do like is the Fab Buttons that you get with this. So if we look at a button, and you get these Fab Buttons. I like these Fab Buttons. Let's do a Fab Button. Alright. Let's do a Fab Button. Fab Button Primary. Did I see an icon button? Yeah, let's do, pardon me, a Fab Button. Oops. what I might do then, I don't like repeating the logic over and over and over again about this loading data is false. So at this stage, because this is no longer the top node of the HTML, I would then add a div. Okay, I don't really know, it doesn't matter what the class is at this point. This is just the singular logic branch to show all of these or none at all. Okay. Oops. So it will either do this or this, and then we have a fab button, and now I will say get next page. Okay, and then this one, more vertical. Oh, that'll do. It doesn't matter what the button is for today. And then at the same here, we've got preview. Okay, and so what we're going to do is if somebody clicks this button, what do we want it to do? Well, we want it to do the function preview. And if I go back to the page, you'll see that I wanted to do the page Pokemon function. So I want to do the page with the next, next data, is that what I called it? Let's go back to check that variable name, Pokemon next URL. Okay. So back to the page, and I then say I want you to load the next page of data if you exist. So then I'll put this button, which is a fab icon button. Yep. In the ng if Pokemon does not equal null, then I would like to see this button. And let's have a look. What do we get? We get a failure. Okay, so let's just have a look at this first. If button click, that looks good, but let's just take this button out for a sec and see if that fixes the problem. Sometimes quicker just to narrow down the problem than it is to try to fix the problem first. Alright, so it does look like I have a problem in my button. My icon button. Alright, what's this mat icon vert? I don't know if I have that. Let's just grab any old button. But I think we need to import the buttons. Okay. Variations. Qcode. TS. Import. What have I missed? Buttons. I should probably actually just read the error message. I'm terrible at just jumping forward. Keyword. Cannot read to uppercase. To uppercase? Where's to uppercase? I hope it's easier for you to read because it's harder for me to use. If. Let's bracket. That will confuse things. Let's see if this is it. Pokemon. Here we go. Now this button's got the wrong icon, but there you go. I'm loading more data. Okay. So then I can go here. I can pick something, a different icon from the icons. Go to the icons. Let's just make it next and previous. Basic icons, examples, overview. Where's the page? Here we go. Let's just go down and see a few. Doesn't really. I'm not super bothered at this point what they are. There's normally a next and a back. Here we go. Back arrow. Forward arrow. So let's call this arrow forward. Pretty certain that's just arrow forward. Okay, and also do a backwards and arrow backward if the previous URL exists. Then we want to go get previous page. Okay, so now we should have, so there's only a next button. Now there's a next and a back button, so we can page through the data. As you can see, boom, the counts haven't changed. But yeah, it's doing the data loading. We have a loader when the data is loading, and we're able to go through and then select any one of these. But then it's doing a data retrieval. I would probably add another visual thing there just to manage that delay in data load, or I might trigger the opening and then have a loading state in there. I'm not 100% certain. I'd probably get it working and then see what feels the best. Or work with the designer to sort of say there is a delay, potential delay, depending on the speed of the API and your network access. And where do we think, what visual thing should we do? Should we wait here? Should we wait there? Should we try to put an interstitial? Should we try to put an interstitial? Fuck that! I can't think of some of the words sometimes when I'm doing the videos. So yeah, working with the designer to try to figure out what I should do in this instance. So I think that's enough. This is actually probably a bit of a longer video than I wanted. You'll notice because the camera went blue twice and I didn't notice. So yeah, you might have to think about this. Maybe switch that camera out for a different camera. I do have a GoPro. Anyway. Well, that's it, folks. That's it for this video, at least. In the next video, I'm probably going to do a component, being a visual component, our own component. In particular, I'm going to do a detail component, which is going to be used here on the left to do the preview. And then I'm probably going to have a detailed page that when you click through, we'll get into that page and it will only be that one Pokemon, like a full page. And we'll try to use some code in that and in other locations, and we might also use the nav bar and move that up into a shared component, because you don't necessarily want to be repeating the code over and over and over again. So I hope this is beneficial. This could be used with your own API. If you were using your own API, you can page through the information. If it had a search, I would have done a search, but unfortunately this API doesn't have a search. And then a creation, etc. is just a form. And you collect the data of that form, do some validation, and then send it to an API. This API is read-only because it's Pokemon and we can't create our own Pokemon. So it makes a lot of sense. So anyway, that's the restrictions of this API, which sort of leads to the scope of the video. But if you want help in those other subjects, there are plenty of other videos on YouTube, and I'm happy to send you over to some. Just let me know in the comments, and I'll try to help. Anyway, have a great day. I'm Darren Rogan. Ciao. Can I launch products on the internet that make money? You'll have to follow me to find out. Then hit the subscribe button and join me on my journey.